forget me. It's 18 minutes past midday. Now, we know our city is a city with such a rich and vast history, from being the world's richest port city to, well, take your pick, sport, music, it's all there, isn't it? You could select any time and write a book about it, and that's what my next guest has done. Inspired by true events and Liverpool's involvement in the US Civil War, Water Street is the debut historical thriller from J.P. Maxwell. J.P. or John, what do you prefer?
Jono.
J.P. sounds showbiz, though, mate.
I'll go for a bit of J.P. then.
Go for a bit of J.P. It sounds like a really interesting book, this. I imagine a lot of research has gone into it to make sure that the history is correct as well. Because, you know, people in this city, they know their history.
Of course, yeah. I think it came to me from during the pandemic, really. I wanted to go and look for the personality of Liverpool. You know, because I believe places have a personality as much as people do. So you go back to the sort of mid 1800s, mid 19th century. That is an absolutely key period for this city. You know, it went from being effectively a small town. Within the space of 30 odd years, the population exploded for the Great Hunger in Ireland. Don't like calling it the potato famine for reasons, but the Great Hunger in Ireland, and the slave industries, and of course the American Civil War, which I found out about. You know, scandalous really, but we effectively funded and built a Confederate Navy out this city through Camel Laird, and that's what kind of spanned the novel.
So what was the interest for us to build that Navy for the United States? Well, what was in it for us? Yeah,
there was a very sort of practical sort of issue going on. So it was called the Cotton Famine at the time. And essentially what that was the Union, the United States, the blue coats, as we were, they were blockading the southern port. It was part of the economic sort of battle. And they had a navy, and the Confederacy didn't have much of a navy to defend this. So it stopped the cotton, the king cotton, the white gold, coming into the city.
Right.
And of course, you know, people who got rich very, very quickly, vast sums of money, weren't too happy about this. So, you know, these were the people who effectively ran the city, including out of the town hall, the cotton exchange, all these places. So it's quite nefarious, because the slavery had been abolished in this country, but actually there was money coming in hand over fist.
This was the legacy of that.
This was the legacy, and that was, as many people will know, the American Civil War. That was one of the main themes, obviously, the Emancipation Proclamation and all that. So all these things were mixed up, but effectively Liverpool as a city, and in terms of the power and the money in the city, where had a vested interest in this. So, you know, it kind of encouraged the kind of network of spies on both sides, sort of banging into each other. And Water Street is a fictionalisation of that. So
for those who don't know where Water Street is, if you stand at the end of where the town hall is, if you stand and look at the town hall, if you're on Castle Street and you look to the left, that goes down to the river. That's Water Street, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny if you go for a curry or a coffee down there. It's a lovely place to sort of hang out down Castle Street, that end. But, you know, I think of it even now as kind of the heart of darkness in a way. Some people might say Concert Square, the heart of darkness, but you know, I think of Water Street because it is sort of, you know, the kind of epicentre of what Liverpool was at the time. You had the Cotton Exchange, you had the town hall, so that's where the power was, which is why I've sort of set it down there. And there's a key scene in the book that happens, you know, a true Western showdown happens on Water Street. So I can't tell you more. You have to read the book.
When you came in, I've not met you before. Shook your hand, said nice to meet you, and I said CSS Shenandoah, and you went no, not quite. So where did I get Shenandoah from?
Well, Shenandoah was part of the Civil War. Again, it was another vessel, and we're talking about, you know, a long list of vessels that were built, usually with registered with British names, but in reality they were even crewed by local crews and then sent out to break the blockade. Shenandoah was the vessel that the Confederacy they surrendered to the British on the Mersey in 1865. So that was the kind of final act of the American Civil War.
Right, so the war actually ended on the River Mersey.
Wow. And actually started from a gun. The first gun that was fired during the American Civil War was built on Duke Street as well. So just to kind of, this is jaw dropping stuff. Lincoln many people will know, not just around the corner from where we are, actually near the former HQ of BBC Radio Merseyside.
Yeah.
There's the old US consulate.
That's
a guy
right.
called Haynes Dudley was the consul at the time, and Dudley was fighting this in the courts, and he had his own spy network trying to stop these vessels getting built. And he was very, very agitated to the extent that Lincoln, he was a very strong supporter of Lincoln himself, was rattling the sabre at the British over this. This was serious stuff that was going on, and was happening right here in Liverpool.
So Paradise Street, we're talking about, the American consulate would have been, I think the last time I was in there, it was the Eagle pub.
Yeah,
That's the one we're talking about, because it had the big American eagle up there. I think it's still there. The original one's in the museum in Liverpool.
That's correct.
I think it's there as well.
Yeah. So it's, everywhere you walk in the city, there's some kind of link. There was a former Confederate consulate as well in a couple of locations, unofficial, because they were saying it was unofficial, but this was happening in plain sight, really.
Well, I've got Abercrombie Square in my mind.
Abercrombie Square as well,
Right.
Rumford Place, around the corner, and they've actually still got this kind of sign to the CSS Alabama.
What gripped you with this? Because once, a story, or once you're gripped by history, particularly of where you live and where it becomes quite addictive, doesn't it?
So, mate, a lot of as many people in the city, it used to be an old joke, you pick up the phone book in Liverpool and it'd be Irish, but it is kind of, I'm part of that sort of, that long line. Many of my ancestors came over in the landing stage, Irish and other sort of backgrounds, and it sort of links, and I wanted the heart and soul, something that kind of reflected these communities, not just a kind of distant historical piece, something that kind of really got into the voices of these people and brought them back from the dead in a way.
So, did you start the book during lockdown, during the pandemic? Did you twiddling your thumbs?
Yeah,
I've got to do something.
It was a bit like that, but it was also, I've had it in the planning for many, many years, and I've gone off and made films, and obviously I teach at LJMU, so there were other things in my life, but I think what happened with the pandemic for me is this was the low-hanging fruit for me. I went into my family background, so there is a kind of link, there's a sort of like a genetic memory thing going on with it, where I picked up on a lot of the stories from my family, and obviously did the wider research. But even just walking around the city, this is going to sound a bit weird, maybe a bit cookie, but you discover things. You get a feel for things, and you understand what events happen on the doorstep or on a corner, and it is absolutely full of them.
And it can be something as simple as like a little plaque, because I think they're kind of dotted all over the place, aren't they? It might just be so and so lived here, and you mightn't recognise the name, but a quick Google and you go, wow. Yeah. I had no idea. First X-ray? What, up by the cathedral? What? Yeah. Really? Little things like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for me, the historical context has to change a little bit as well, because, we're still coming to terms with this stuff, and in recent decades that it has been changing the viewpoint on this history, and I think it will continue to change. It will still be moving on to like the kind of wider issues that affect us today. Yeah. That is part of the thing behind Water Street for me. It's not just the history; it's what's happened over the last 10 years. The kind of some of the kind of insidious ideas behind the Confederacy still persist, and they persist in the US.
But if you tell somebody that's the story, often enough, you're absorbed by that. I remember being a kid and being taken down to the waterfront, and it was like, oh, see those rings on the dock there? That's where the slaves were. No, that's just not fact. But if somebody tells you that as a child, you then pass that on, and that's when history becomes really distorted. And because when we're telling a story, we all like to embellish it, don't we? We all like to be liked and embellish a story. But when you're talking about historical facts, you can't embellish, because then it's not fact.
Yeah, and I think this is why I took it into a kind of fictional sort of realm, really, because it allowed me to sort of move around in it more than if I was writing a kind of straight dry.
Because it's based on true events, isn't it?
Based on, absolutely. It's based on true events, and also it's one of the things about espionage that people sometimes don't get, that things just slip under the radar, and it is the kind of driver for me to write a Western spy thriller. You know, the kind of basis on this. Liverpool's the perfect place for it. Liverpool itself is dramatic.
Yeah.
We're a city of drama queens, let's face it. Like, so, you know, no reflection on you, Tony, of course. Like,
No,
but,
hey,
yeah,
listen, no, you know, absolutely right. You know, I think that should be the city's motto in Latin. We're a city of drama queens.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely.
Should be the way. So what kind of themes do you cover, without giving it away, obviously, what kind of themes do you cover in the book?
Well, the central character, Harriet, she's effectively spying on her husband. The whole thing is a sort of honey trap on him. He's the sort of heart of dark. He's roughly based on a real guy, a guy called James Dunwoody Bullock, who was actually the Confederate sort of spy master, ringleader for all these boats that were getting built here. And my idea was to have a strong kind of a feminine hero that came in and spied on her own husband. I think it's something that's very close to home. If it's the person who's right next to you, it's the person who's actually trying to undo you and sabotage you. So that's a sort of classic sort of Western trope in a way. It sort of it brings in like that kind of idea of betrayal. But actually, I'm mapping that to the whole kind of picture of the American Civil War and what it meant. It was such a pivotal moment in history. Also bringing the Irish into it as well. Big thing for me, because the Irish in the city everyone knows about, but you know, the fact was the Irish actually had to fight other people's wars all the time, and the American Civil War was another case of that. So you know, there are a few things in the melting pot there, but believe me, it all comes to the kind of head in the sort of closing chapters.
Okay, so the book, is it out now? Is it coming out, or what's
it's out on, obviously, of course, Amazon. I don't want to extol the big Bezos bazaar too much, like, but it's
if you want to sell them, mate.
Absolutely, and that's and the algorithm is, you know, buy it off Amazon and review it. You get an ebook, print book. But happily, I've been around all the local independent bookstores. I'm really big fan of them as well. So, you know, if you want to hit up any of them, obviously Waterstones, but any of the small ones, News from Nowhere, massive fan of them. Yeah. Big shout out to them. You know, all of these local bookstores should be stocking it, but obviously Amazon, it's available on there.
Is this your first attempt at doing something like this?
I've got a few in the run up to this. This is hopefully, depending on how many people buy it, but this is hopefully the first of a run of them. So I've got 6 lined up. The next one's the Lincoln assassination, and there's a direct link with John Surratt, who escaped to Liverpool in the aftermath of the Lincoln assassination.
Why have I got Wilkes Booth going around him? Is that connected to that?
Well, rumour had it his dad was from Liverpool. His dad actually wasn't from Liverpool. There is a connection with Wilkes Booth in Liverpool. Right. But John Surratt was actually one of the main sort of people behind the assassination. So the same character is going to kind of reappear in the next novel, and she's going to be tackling the Lincoln assassination.
You've got it all planned out, mate, haven't you? Where are you finding the time to teach?
Well, you know, yeah.
Incorporate it in there.
Yeah,
that's the way you
throw
do
it all in together.
All right, it's called Water Street, set in Liverpool, inspired by true events as well. A US Civil War thriller, and you'll be able to get it at the aforementioned places as well. Nice to meet you. Thanks. I love doing a little bit of a history lesson.
Cheers,
That was
mate.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Just